everyone. Welcome to Reviewia Talks. So today is a very interesting episode. We have a very interesting guest with us. So I'll take the next minute to introduce Anu. Anu Senan is our guest today. Hi Anu, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all ours. So I'll take the minute to introduce you to our viewers. Anu is a mother of a 9-year-old. She is an engineer and an MBA by education. She currently works as the enterprise architecture lead at UNICEF in New York City. So as you see, there are already three roles that I've spoken of about her. And the fourth one, which we are going to talk about today a little more in detail, is that she's a podcast host. She hosts the podcast which goes by the name of Heroes of New York. Anu has already won two Moth Story Slams, and currently she is working on her solo show production. And as I mentioned earlier, Anu lives in New York City with her husband and her 9-year-old son. So, Anu, welcome once again. It's great to have you be our guest in this episode.
Thank you, Arijit. I look forward to it.
Great. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers would be very keen to understand this whole thing about podcasts. We keep
Mhm.
hearing it more so. During the lockdown, it seems to have really skyrocketed. People are more keen to listen to podcasts. There are more people
Yeah.
who are creating podcasts, hosting podcasts. So, I think we would be curious to understand, how
Mhm.
did podcast happen to you? That'll be our first question.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned that podcasting has gone up or listenership has gone up during the lockdown. And that's exactly when I got into the world of podcasting. Um, Honestly, I was not much into it before that. I am a busy mom, as you just mentioned. There's no time to listen per se, and New York makes your life really busy. But during the lockdown, when we were all, and especially New York City, when we went through the deep lockdown in March last year, we were huddled up in our small apartments, and outside of work there was not much to do, and one could sense the frustration. The lockdown was very sudden, and people were going through shock and denial and depression all at the same time. They didn't have the time to process their feelings. And at the same time, I saw people in my neighborhood who were rising to the occasion to help other people, and nobody was covering this. This is not in the media. The media, whatever media was publishing, was pretty negative. And I thought, here's an opportunity to share a good story with a larger audience, and pass on a message of hope and positivity. That was my inspiration to start the podcast in the first place. And over time, it has built, the listenership has grown, and I have been able to build a sense of community, which is really what every podcast is about. You bring loyal listeners to a common topic, and there's a sense of community amongst them as they experience those stories.
Great, got it. So, just so that we understand, how many episodes or podcasts have you recorded till now?
So I will be publishing the last episode of season 2 today. And I believe, I haven't counted it, but it's around 38 odd episodes so far. And in April, I'll complete a year of having started this podcast.
Wow, wow. So, while I had a few more questions in mind, but I'll kind of throw one question which comes to my mind now. You mentioned 38. Okay. It has taken a fair bit of relentlessness at your end to continue to do this. And there's this behavior that we see with most of us, that we start off something and then we give it up. So how did you manage to maintain the energy and be consistent? And you're nearly touching 40 in terms of the past podcast that you created. How did you do that?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Arijit. It's not easy. When we start any endeavor, there's that enthusiasm, that the expectancy of a new journey. But over time, one tends to become complacent. You've done it over time, and a lot of podcasts are not revenue driven. So, for example, I don't generate a revenue out of my podcast. I do it as a hobby. So to be driven is a big thing. You have to publish an episode at a set frequency, a week, once a week, or once every 2 weeks because your audience expects it. So you must have an entrepreneurial mindset, and you must be ready to generate a new story. And creating a story has its own challenges. You have to come up with something that's interesting to your audience. So as a podcaster, I have to ask myself, will the story interest my listeners, and what angle should I focus on? What perspective should I bring to the story? So there's a lot of thinking involved in building the story. Then you have to actually, record the story, edit it, and then produce it and publish it, and then of course there's promotion. So it's not easy, and it's on top of my regular job. So it takes, I would say, discipline and a lot of dedication.
Right, right. Interesting that you mentioned that. I think that's what is missing when it comes to doing something for an extended period of time. A lot of us miss out on demonstrating that discipline.
Hmm.
So this is great. I think what you've done in the past year is phenomenal. So that our viewers get a little more understanding of how things work when it comes to podcasting. Can you please throw some light on the kind of impact podcasts have had? Why do we see this phenomena? Getting more and more listeners, more and more followers at a high level. How do you think podcasts are impacting people the world over? Do you have a
Yeah,
view
now
on
that's a very interesting question. So, just like you mentioned, that listenership went up during the lockdown, and it's one of those prime reasons. When people are in some ways locked down, physically or mentally, because you can't move around, you can't talk with other people much in person. What do you do with your time? So there's a lot of time we have on our hands. That's one reason. The other reason is that podcasting is truly free. For one person to build a podcast, you really need a good idea. You don't need a Hollywood producer. You don't need expensive technology or infrastructure on your site. Good ideas and simple recording equipment can help you to start a podcast. The investment is very minimal. And also for the listener, there's literally no investment. You just need a smartphone. If you're on Apple iPhones, the Apple podcast is inbuilt. You don't even have to download it. And the majority of podcasts are free to listen to, they're not paid. So it's easy to access. The market is easy to access. I've also seen that over, information is disseminated over different mediums. There's news channels, there's the TV channels, etc. And the audience for these different channels have been dropping over the years. Fewer people read newspapers, whether digital or print. Fewer people are watching TV channels for whatever reason, and more people listen to podcasts because guess what? We are a multitasking generation. So if I'm driving or doing the laundry or doing the housework, I can still listen to my podcast in the background, and that's where they come in. And podcasts cover a whole variety of topics, from space travel to phytoplankton. You'll find one podcast that caters to different topics, and you can learn so much without having to read. And as I think as a generation, we are also losing the patience to read through big volumes of work. Listening becomes easier. So that's another reason why podcasts have a major impact.
Great. I think that's very insightful. I think the reason why podcast is picking up now is very clear in my mind. The fact that we have
Mhm.
become more multitasking oriented, reduced patience levels, busy
Yep.
lives. I think our
Yep.
behaviors of absorbing and consuming information has changed. It is no more the newspaper or digital print or
Absolutely.
television for that matter.
Yeah. And Arijit, what's interesting is that there are podcasts that cater to all kinds of audience.
Mhm.
My 9-year-old has found a podcast that he liked. I mean, it's a different matter that he stopped listening in 5 days because his patience is that low. But there is a podcast that caters to all ages and different demographics.
Wow, wow. Great. So my next question, Anu, you already answered. My question was, more about how do you generate revenue for this podcast, but you said that currently you don't. However, if someone wants to generate revenue through, being a podcast host, what are the avenues to do that? Can you share
Mhm.
some insights around that?
Sure. I'm part of a larger podcasting community on Facebook where, people share their journeys. And what I've learned is a lot of people are excited about starting a podcast, but they also have their eyes on some monetary goals. Now, podcasts don't always work that way. As with any business, you need to invest in it long term, build a loyal audience or listenership before you can actually start generating revenue. Unless, of course, you're a big brand like, Tim Ferriss, for example. He has a major podcast with over 1 million downloads, and he has sponsors. So you can get sponsors when your podcast is pretty big, has a huge following, has a lot of downloads, and you can obviously find sponsors. The other way is affiliate marketing. Now, when you start a podcast, you're going to host your podcast on some platform. Many of these platforms come with affiliate marketing partners, so you can, advertise or submit your podcast details to them, and if they see it's a good fit, you can obviously start embedding affiliate marketing into your podcast episodes. That's one way. One of the most important non-monetary gains of podcasting is networking or building relationships or social capital. Like I found out when I started my podcast. In 2020, I don't think I stepped out of my house, but I made more connections than I ever imagined possible in a single year. Simply by bringing on guests on my show and using cross promotion, going on other people's podcasts, you build relationships that inevitably lead to more business. So that is the side of podcasting that I think is of a huge advantage to anyone who wants to promote a business or a product through podcasting.
Great. So one is sponsorship, the other is affiliate marketing that you spoke of.
Mhm.
And is sponsorship similar to advertising or is it any different?
Honestly, I haven't tried it, so I will not give you the answer to it directly.
Okay,
Affiliate marketing definitely involves a lot of advertisement coming in.
got it, got it. And I think the last point that you mentioned about non-monetary gain, that of network, I think that's paramount. That's paramount for
Mhm.
somebody who is on an entrepreneurial journey. I think
Mhm.
these are great insights, Anu, that you shared about an upcoming vocation that people can aspire to, take up, which is being a podcast host. As a parting message, what would you want to tell, viewers who might be mulling about going, your way, going to become a podcast host? What would be your, top 2 or 3 messages to those people?
Well, I would say if you're interested in starting a podcast, start by asking yourself a few critical questions. Why do I want to start a podcast? This is the most important reason. This is your North Star. This is what will keep you on the path long after you've started it. So ask yourself, why do you want to start a podcast? And what message do you want to deliver to the audience? In my case, I wanted to deliver a message of hope and positivity. And that was what I channeled through Heroes of New York. So ask yourself what message you want to give your audience. And finally, ask yourself who is your audience? And this is really critical. It's no use making content and generating it if you don't know who your target audience is. You've got to have tailored messages hitting a particular segment in if you want to be successful. So ask yourself those questions. It will help you clarify your purpose behind podcasting, because podcasting is just one medium. There is YouTube, you can have a YouTube channel, there's Clubhouse, and there are a lot of different platforms that are mushrooming. So decide why you want to be on a podcast or start a podcast. That will be the most important thing you can do before you jump into it headlong. Then understand what it takes. There's a lot of investment of time, energy, and passion. The minute your passion dries up, it doesn't matter how much time and energy you have, you won't feel driven to take it forward. So the passion should stay. In my case, it's been a year now, but I still find a lot of relevant stories in my community that I think are worth sharing. So I'm driven to share those stories. So make sure that you have the passion, the time, and the energy. It's easy to find a story worth sharing, but to produce it and publish it in a format that people want to listen to is a challenge. Creatively challenging, but definitely a challenge.
Great. I think these are great messages for somebody who wants to tread the path of being a podcast host. Anu, this was a pleasure having you on our episode this time round. Thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing your thoughts and views with our viewers.
Thank you, Arijit. Love
Really,
being on your show.
thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye.